So welcome everyone. Welcome to this is the EAIGG's talk on establishing ethical AI standards. Now, in recent meetings, we've discussed the AI Act in Brussels, but we've put much less focus on the individual efforts from nation states to define and operationalize the regulations in really more concrete ways. So today we're going to take a granular look at one of Europe's broadest efforts to partner with industry players to shape the development of trustworthy AI applications for critical systems. We'll take a look at Confiance.ai, which is a French-led initiative, and they've partnered with the international standards body, IEEE, as well as Germany's standards body, VDE, to establish a uniform approach to norms, standards, and even the labeling of trustworthy AI in critical systems. Our panelists today are Dr. Konstantinos Karakalios, who's Managing Director of the IEEE Standards Association and a member of the IEEE Management Council. As Managing Director, Dr. Karakalios has been enhancing IEEE's efforts in global standards development in strategic emerging technology fields through technical excellence of staff, expansion of global presence and activities, and emphasis on inclusiveness and good governance, including the reform of IEEE standards-related patent policy. We have Julien Chiaroni, who's former director of the Grand Défi, or the Great Challenges in the French Innovation Council, which is tasked with AI standardization in France. He was previously director of strategy and program at LIST, the Institute of Digital and Artificial Intelligence Technologies, with more than 700 researchers located in Paris-Saclay and Grenoble. And we also have Dr. Sebastian Hallens-Lieben, who is the chair of CEN-CNREC, JTC 21, where European AI standards to underpin EU regulation are being developed. He's a member of the Expert Advisory Board of the EU STAND ICT program and chair of the Trusted Information Working Group. Dr. Hallens-Lieben co-chairs the Classification and Risk Assessment Working Group in OECD 1.ai, and he has roles in AI committees at the European Innovation Council, the Council of Europe, and UNESCO. So welcome to our esteemed panelists. Great to have you here. And before we actually begin the panel itself and the questions, I want to offer some time to Julien to give a little overview of Confiance.ai and to share a few slides. So Julien, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. So I will just share my screen and I think that it's fine. So I will just show you some few slides about what we do in France in terms of support for trustworthy and industrial AI. So we launched a program maybe 3 to 4 years ago. And the idea was really to promote the development of trustworthy AI in France, but also in Europe and abroad. So, it will be better. So really, it was for France a response of a way to respond to the future EU regulation on artificial intelligence, and really how we can handle the question of future applications that need to be at least in compliance with the EU regulation and with the future standards and norms. And what we see is really the question of risk management, the trustworthiness characteristics that are really key in order to manage to implement the regulation, but also to doing some business application using AI. So we really want to support the implementation of the EAIGG. So the main idea was really to to develop some solution in order to perform either development of application, but also audit certification, and the link between the horizontal standardization, especially for AI, and also the vertical business standardization that has to be also complementary to the AI Act. So I will make a short presentation, but if you have any question, we launched a French strategy to tackle this challenge. So it was really focused on critical system. So the main question was the question of designing, deploying, and maintaining AI-based critical system, and how we can handle this question. So we choose to have 3 main pillars in terms of activities. One on standardization. So we have some cooperation, especially with IEEE, with VD also on standardization for AI Act implementation. So we work a lot on AI standardization, but we also invest on conformity assessments because we need also to have conformity assessment, evaluation, homologation, certification of product in order to put this product into the market. So we have to also support this ecosystem. And we have finally the first pillar, which is dedicated to engineering tools and methodologies. So it's mean how you can handle or complete MLOps workflow with some new tools and new methodologies in order to ensure the right properties into your system. So it goes from data to system engineering, and it was a public-private partnership. But I will give you some few more insight on. So this first pillar is called Confiance.ai. So it's really focused on trusted AI engineering tools and methodologies that we can provide to industrial companies in order to enable them to develop some critical product based on AI. So we have what is really interesting is we have partner coming from different critical industry. We have aeronautic industry with Safran, Thales, and Airbus. We have also automotive industry with Renault and Valeo. We have also defense industry with Naval, IT industry with Sopra and Atos. So really, we try to push a generic approach in order to have tools that are sufficiently generic in order to cover many applications for many sectors and business sectors. So actually, we have roughly 150 or 200 people working on Confiance.ai. So it's probably one of the biggest research and technological program on trustworthy AI in Europe. And we launched this program 2 years ago in an operational phase. We we take maybe one year to prepare the project and to launch the project. So Confiance is really divided into 7 sub projects. So everything is based on industrial use cases. So it means that partners are providing industrial use cases. So it's not only use cases coming from the literature. And we have 4 projects that are covering the technological part. So it means how we can handle the question of data and knowledge. So it means data bias, data quality, the conformity of the data set regarding the operational domain design, etc., etc. So all the question related to data and knowledge. We have one project which is dedicated to the design and how we can handle trustworthy by design. A third project more based on evaluation and runtime monitoring, and the fourth project on the embedded system, so how you can develop some algorithm with a certain property, and you'll be sure that once you embed your algorithm into embedded system, the property will be the same. We have after 2 projects on methodologies, so one on quality insurance, so more with a system view, and one on everything related to AI-based development. And at the end, everything is, integrated into one environment, which is a software platform. So it's a 45 million euro program for a 4-year duration. So it means that it's an effort, roughly an effort of 150 or 200 people for 4 years. So the roadmap is really incremental. So we try to tackle simple applications, so low critical application, maybe more focus on data-driven AI. And the idea is really to implement some new use cases. So it was at the beginning time series, images, video, etc. And now we work on audio, NLP, etc. And the idea is really to increase the criticality of the system with the time, and to finish with a high criticality in 2024, and with a system view or a system demonstration, for example, for autonomous vehicle or for Industry 4.0 application. So as you may see, everything at each year is released in one batch. So it means that all the development for 1 year is released in one batch at the end of the year, and this batch is tested by the partner, and we increase the number of applications and tools that are embedded into the platform each year in order to enlarge the covering application that we can address. The Confiance ecosystem is maybe it's an old slide. It's maybe more 50 partner actually. So we have 1/3 that are big company. We have 1/3 that are startup and SMEs that are providing most of the time some tech. And the last third is more RTO or research laboratories in France. And we have also strong partnership with standardization association, so with AFNOR, with ROCAE for aeronautic, for example, with IEEE and also with VDE. So the idea is really to increase the ecosystem in order to have more and more activities and more competencies to tackle this challenge, because it's really a big issue. So Confiance is not really, just to finish on this slide, Confiance is not a fixed consortium. It's really a consortium that are growing with the time. So we start with maybe 13 partners, and at the end of the first year, we were roughly 40 partners. So we work also a lot on standardization activities, so especially with some partner in Europe and also with IEEE. So we have a strong activities, especially at the Sensenelec and ISO. We start with these activities, the standardization activities, with the standardization cartography. We also perform a survey on AI standardization, because for us it was really important to know what are the needs coming from the main stakeholder. It could be big companies, startup, and SMEs. We build a standardization roadmap that was published in 2022, and we have some cooperation in Europe and abroad. So really, the idea is to have some participation into standardization organization and to develop some methodologies or some technologies into Confiance.ai, and after to convert, to transform this methodology and these technologies into standards that can be shared with other people. And the idea is really to share this result in order to have the standards in time for the EAIGG application. So thank you so much. It was really quick, but I have only 5 minutes, so maybe I was too long. But if you have any question, please, I will be pleased to answer.
That was great. Thanks so much, Julien. And we'll have some time for questions at the end. So that was a sort of broad overview of Confiance.ai, and I'd like to segue to the panel and to weave the other strands in here. So just by way of background, in addition to Confiance.ai, we also have the IEEE. I just wanted to highlight this, that the IEEE 7000 series, the Standard on Ethics on Autonomous and Intelligent Systems, it establishes specifications and processes for engineers to translate ethical considerations into system requirements and design practices. Further, we also have the AI Act that explores a voluntary labeling scheme for enhancing protection against high-risk systems. In Germany, VDE has been a leading consortium of industry, academia, and civil society that's created an AI trust standard and label that complements the approaches taken by France and IEEE. So we have a few of these different approaches over here. And now to move to the panel itself, I think it's important to begin with a shared understanding. So given the importance of shared definitions for the advancement of any specifications, norms, or standards, I want to begin with the trustworthiness in AI development. So despite the three of you over the last few years working together cooperatively, but in different standardization bodies in different countries, please help us define trustworthy AI and its component parts, and explain how you converged on a definition, a shared definition. Anyone can begin.
I'll make a
first. Yeah, I'll make a first stab. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. There was a time 3, 4, 5 years ago when almost every organization globally published some sort of white paper or position paper on AI ethics, spelling out the principles that they thought are relevant and need to be put into practice. and that included things like transparency, fairness, explainability, accountability, robustness. And if you analyze those papers, and if you remove duplicates and kind of variations in terminology, they are remarkably consistent in what they see as the top aspects of AI ethics and trustworthiness. So most of the approaches I know, and certainly the approach that we took with the AI trust standard and label, was to really follow the data in a way, do a cross-reference, a meta-analysis of all those papers, and then pick out the top 5 or 6 categories as the key constituents of trustworthiness. What I should also add is that in many cases, it's not easy to define what, for example, fairness is or what transparency is. And we found that as soon as we drill one level down, if we try to formulate, for example, the criteria that make up transparency, it becomes a lot easier and less controversial, because then you can talk about, well, transparency means you need to have visibility of the training data, you need to have visibility of the model, you need to have that information accessible, and you also need to have that information understandable to a reasonably interested layperson rather than just to an AI specialist. And at that level of criteria, just below the top level categories, it becomes even easier to see common ground and to see a common understanding.
Konstantinos, you're on mute.
Yes, so this was an excellent introduction. So if I may follow up and build upon what Sebastian said, and also the example about transparency, I find this very interesting. First of all, of course, trustworthiness is an umbrella term, and it comprises many features, behaviors, and properties, and all of this can lead a system of interest to be relied upon as being truthful and honest. And as Sebastian mentioned, this can be broken down to several high-level, let's say, ontologies or mega criteria like transparency, let's say, freedom from algorithmic and data bias, fairness, reliability, security, and so on. And of course, all the people agree that this would be helpful to have these characteristics. And as Sebastian again said, it gets interesting if you look further down, what we mean by this. And just to give you an example of, let's say, of an emergent ethical property related to transparency, it could be that you're aware that you're speaking to a robot and not to a human. And this could be a driver goal that we say that an AI system, it would make clear that you speak to an AI system and not to a human. And this is a driver. And then there are some suite of predictors that can help us say, when does a system fulfill this requirement and so on. And then you go down to design, to organization, and so on. And you have then, and then you can measure this. Is it done or not? And you can benchmark it and so on. And we have done this. And as the people, Julien and also Sebastian know, we have done precisely this for these 4 big categories of criteria: for transparency, accountability, minimization of bias, and respect of our sphere of privacy. And for each one of these, we have 100 to 150 criteria that measure it. And this is very concrete. So transparency for whom, what does it mean for different audiences, and how you can measure it. And so this can be done. We are not condemned to stay with aspirations at high level. I agree with you, Sebastian. And then if we get down to the levels, then we can agree, we can be more precise, we can learn from each other. And this is what we're doing right now also. And I would say a little more as we progress in our discussion, how we cooperate and why it can improve the conditions for everyone, this cooperation.
Julien, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so no, but we share the same point of view with Constantinos and Sebastian. So just to focus on one point, we don't speak about AI. We speak about system using AI because really it's important to speak about the system because you can have many algorithms inside. You can have a different component, etc., etc. So it's really important to speak about the system because the system corresponding to the application, and you want performance, the respect of criteria of this application, and not only from one algorithm. So that's my point. And the second one is, in fact, to summarize a little bit, it's really difficult to define what is trust. So the main challenges when you have high specification level, it's really to define the criteria you will use to characterize you will use to characterize the trustworthiness. So that's why we work all a lot on this point all together, and how we can define terminology, we can define some specification, we have some KPIs, etc., etc., in order to have something which is at the end actionable by people. And that's the main point of view, I guess.
To that end, there's actually a question already in the crowd about if there's documentation around those KPIs. I'm not sure there's any links that we can share or distribute afterwards, but some of the audience are curious.
There is. I mean, the VDE standard is all open, and I think just picking up on Constantinos and Julien, the measurability is key. There is no point in just creating beautiful prose that says, oh, our system is so fair and it's so transparent, in order to enforce it, but also in order to track, are we getting any better in having products that are more trustworthy? We need to measure trustworthiness, or at least we need to measure the aspects of trustworthiness. And it's quite interesting to see the different approaches that various groups have taken, but all congregating in a similar place. And I think the discussion has evolved away from simple checklists that, for example, the high-level expert group of the European Union created kind of as a first attempt, and towards more fine-grained assessment methods where you have multiple levels. So it's not just a yes/no, but it's a strong yes to a strong no, and the levels in between are tailored to the specific aspect that you're looking at. And to me, that is actually key in making a meaningful statement, and also in avoiding false incentives where people just follow the letter of a framework rather than the spirit.
Great. So we'll make sure to get those links and distribute those afterwards too. I want to move to process development and design. How do you establish objective attributes of trustworthiness and integrate this into a unified approach to engineering trustworthy AI? What kind of assessments, we're talking about measuring, what kind of assessments do you leverage? Do you put a scoring schema in place? Do you integrate other ethical aspects such as human oversight, privacy, fairness, etc.?
So it will maybe I can start on this question, but in fact, when you want to develop some process development, you need to have some criteria. For example, what is explainability, and what are the main KPI you will address for explainability to demonstrate your explainability. But what is really complicated is that it's really depend on what type of explainability you have, because you can have a local explainability, you can have an explainability for the data set, you can have many explainability into your system, in fact. So the main challenge is really to build up a clear view of scoring, in fact, that you will use to demonstrate the conformity of your system. And that's what we do, for example, into discussion with the VD on label. For example, we try to focus on really high-level scoring that are really demonstrated using some tools and methodologies and assessment, etc., etc. So, but the challenge is really the demonstration you will propose for your system. So how you have different type of robustness, how you can go from this different type of robustness to one robustness for the system. So it's really the methodologies you will use and the tools you will use in order to do that. That's the main key, or the main challenge today.
If I can build upon what Julian said, or Sebastian, would you like to follow?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Please.
Okay. There are, I think, perhaps two different processes. One is, as you said, the development and design for new systems, when you design a new system. And the other is how you can assess the quality of an existing system. Regarding the design of a new system, well, engineers, we know that for high integrity, complexity systems and AI systems such really of high complexity and integrity, then we know how to check for reliability, their availability, resilience, and dependability. And the Confiance Consortium and the French industry, they have all the tools they need to do this, all this auditing. But if we talk about the AI systems, then they have a different nature. They can be adaptive or partly autonomous, and this requires really a new consultative approach, which would include also social impact and ethical assurance, depending on the system. There are purely engineering systems where societal impact is not really an issue, but a lot of AI, deployed AI systems have a huge social impact. If we talk about the internet platforms and the nudging, how they make our children addictive and so on, there are huge problems there. So, and this is not traditionally the power of systems engineers. This is new territory for us. So when we started this years ago from IEEE, we felt quite lonely, I must say, and faced a lot of headwinds. And we're very glad to see now that this has become mainstream. And we have partners with whom we can talk, we can work together and so on. This is very important. We need new process models. It is a confluence of engineering process and human-centered approach. And for this, we as engineers, we need to start working also with other disciplines. This is extremely important. And I see this happening in many areas and with all partners that are here today. And so there is a lot of background here. I could really have a speech about this, but I prefer to stop here and to give the floor to Sebastian.
Yeah, that's not that much to add. I think the realization from the metrics work on trustworthiness over the past few years has been that you need to look at certain characteristics that are on the product level, and they've got the advantage of being measurable in hindsight after the product is already finished and maybe in the market, but also assessing the organization's willingness and maturity and capability of outputting trustworthy AI. And the complementarity of kind of us three as we're sitting here is very much on that level, in taking more of a product focus, taking more of a governance focus, taking more of an organization focus, taking more of a best practice versus more of an enforcement focus. And we're actually quite deep in the analysis with the French consortium, and we've also started to do that comparative analysis with the IEEE colleagues, because ultimately, I don't think it's realistic to envisage merging all those approaches, because it would create a very, very big and very unwieldy structure that is hard to achieve consensus in. But what is possible and what is also necessary, in my view, is to highlight the mutual mappings, or in academic terms, you would say the mutual recognition of certain aspects of those frameworks, so that they can complement each other and still have an effect as a whole, as a sum that is bigger than the parts. And I'm very, very glad that we're having those good conversations and fruitful conversations. And I expect that we will see a consolidation, not kind of putting everything into one pot, but a consolidation in approaches and a compatibility of approaches as well, or an interoperability.
Great. So actually, to look closer at the French effort, the Confiance.ai, it's actually one of the largest public-private partnerships in Europe. And the partners are managing AI systems across a wide variety of industries, a wide variety of sectors. So this creates a broad array of use cases, and certainly set of limitations based on what each partner is willing to share. What use cases are covered under the consortium and which are not?
It's really a good question, because when you want to develop some tools and methodologies, you will need to have some use cases coming from industry. It's really important to have real use case and not only coming from the literature. So it was one of the great achievement of Confiance.ai. All the industrial are accepting to share some use cases. So it means to share data, but also to involve people into the program, etc., etc. So actually, we have use cases coming from Industry 4.0. For example, I can give you an example on computer vision for Industry 4.0 application. So coming from automotive industry, we have also use cases such as time series for health application. We have also use cases coming from automotive industry for autonomous driving. So it's really wide in terms of use cases that are available. Actually, we have maybe 10 to 15 use cases, and also some sub-use cases in order to be sure that the genericity of the tools are demonstrated. So we develop on one use cases, and after we use some other use cases in order to demonstrate the genericity of the tools and methodologies that we are implementing into Confiance.ai. So it's one of the chance, and also to have people, because it's really also what we heard in terms of use cases. So it's not mean only data, it's really people that are quality manager, people that are working into the working on the system and the product development, etc., etc. So it's all these people also that are providing some knowledge in order to demonstrate the trustworthiness of the application. So the main challenge now for us, it's really to go from functions to really critical system application. So it means that how you can have a real system, for example, for autonomous application, but really with the monitoring and complete system with embedded and hardware also inside, etc., etc. And the demonstration, actually, the big challenge is really to demonstrate into a critical system and a complex system application. So that's the point we are actually into Confiance.ai, and we see that when we go really close to the business and to the system, it's quite more difficult to share insight from industrial into one filière, for example. So for example, it's more difficult to have to share information between people, between industry coming from the same sector, such as aeronautic industry. So we adapt a little bit some specification and some governance into Confiance.ai to take into account these issues. And actually, we are working on this system application and system use cases, and we don't have yet the results, but it will be done at the end of the year. So, and we work also on NLP application. We try to, and also everything related to hybrid AI, such as combination between knowledge-based system with deep learning system. We have also a combination from use case that are a combination from simulation to AI-based system, etc., etc. So we try also to tackle and to use hybrid AI in order to reinforce the trustworthiness, but also to study this use case into Confiance.ai.
Could you outline how the French and German approaches are currently being used to and consolidated and are driving the development of a harmonized standard across Europe for the AI Act?
Yeah, I can.
For you, Sebastian.
Yeah, I can maybe outline why this is so important first, and then what's actually happening. So the AI Act is going to be finalized sometime later this year, and then there's typically a 2-year grace period until the AI Act takes effect. And during those 2 years, all the harmonized standards that underpin the AI Act and that tell companies how to satisfy it have to be concluded as well. And in fact, they have to be concluded a few months earlier, so companies have got time to digest them and to implement them. And given that the final stretch of standards development is taken up by formal processes, by various balloting and feedback loops, there's only really a year or so for actual development. And in the standardization world, that is a blink of an eye at best. So it's not feasible to start from an empty sheet of paper and to pull together experts and say, well, let's think about a European AI trustworthiness standards to underpin the AI Act. That's not going to work. So we have to start from what is already there. And the French approach and the German approach are playing a big role there as the basis, a starting point for discussion on the trustworthiness standard in JTC 21. And we're also having quite intense discussions with IEEE to bring in their viewpoint, because again, it's about consolidation, it's about critical mass. And I would very much welcome a development in JTC 21 that leads to a harmonized standard that is relatively close to the situation that we have right now.
Anyone have something to add there?
I can say something to this if Julian wants to wait. So this is a very interesting question, and I agree with everything that Sebastian said. And I believe the German-French collaboration would really boost and give the momentum that is necessary in this landscape in Europe. Now, we are a global organization, but we're very much engaged in Europe. Most of the standards that are relevant for what here we're talking about, including the 7000 series, which is design standards, including our certification schemes, which is quality assessment, they were done by Europeans. So they embed really very deeply the European values and ethicality. We are very much interested in making them available because, as Sebastian said, you cannot start from scratch. You have to take what is available. And this is the reason why the European Commission has asked the GRC in Sevilla to make an assessment of what is the current state and where should they start from. And they made it. So they investigated what the different organizations are doing and also what we are doing. The outcome of the report is public. And in one sentence, practically, IEEE, we have been developing what is necessary to implement the AI Act horizontally and also in some verticals. It is not 100%, but it is quite advanced. And what is interesting, and this is what we're discussing here with Sebastian and Julien, how we can make this available as a building block. It is not take it or leave it and so on. It is really a global intelligence that is made available regionally and nationally. And I think everybody can benefit from this. both Europe and GUI, because we're going to learn by adapting this to the European circumstances. We're going to learn also, and this is happening. This is not theory. We have already introduced a standard at the level of the CENELEC as a so-called CENELEC workshop agreement, and there has been a very, very vivid deliberation around this standard. 100 comments and so on were made, and all accepted, which interestingly did not alter the substance of the standard. It made it more European with references and the sources and so on. And here we can do what we cannot do in other standards. We would never do this for Wi-Fi because it is interoperability. We cannot have regional interoperability, so this would be chaos. But for what we are talking here, here we can adopt it regionally. Every region and every country, they can have their own really focus. And this is where things get very interesting, and where we as standardizers should learn how to rethink. It is not about having one standard which rules the world. It is having some fundamental values and specifications which can be adapted regionally and locally, I believe. Of course, for a political structure like the European Union, they need to have one harmonized standard, I understand. So all in all, it is politically a very interesting situation, because now the regulator wants something, the European Commission, and we engineers and the others, we have to deliver. And I would just finish this by saying that we, IEEE, are here to contribute what we have been doing over the years, which in my opinion is quite close to what is needed, and to adapt it with your help here, such as to fit your needs, and the procedural, let's say, intricacies about IP and so on. We find solutions for this. This is really not a problem, because we are driven by the purpose, and we all want to have reliable systems for the industry and for our societies.
Yeah, that's actually a really important point. I'd like to underline that too. That's the hurdles to overcome are procedural hurdles, formal hurdles, and not a lack of shared purpose or a lack of kind of shared and very similar understanding.
Glad to hear that, Sebastian.
One last question, really about looking forward. We sort of teased on this a little bit about where things are headed with the AI Act in the year ahead. Where's the broader standardization effort headed in 2023? Are there any high-level milestones or roadmaps you can share with our group for the year ahead? Are there efforts to expand this? Well, we talked a little bit about expanding it geographically to different localities. And also, are there any efforts to expand the functional scope of the standardization effort? And one last little sub-question there is, how do you deal with the speed of tech development? For example, we haven't spent any time with the generative AI boom, but how does that integrate here, and does it fall under the scope? How will that be dealt with as this progresses?
Yeah, maybe picking up on the two parts of your question separately. As far as the big milestones are concerned, I would actually be quite modest and say, as far as JTC 21 is concerned, we just have to do the work now. The standardization request is there. We've set up all the structures that we need. We're in the process of kicking off one work item after another. We just have to do it and go through the hard slog of consensus building in order to build a set of good standards in a short period of time. As far as generative AI is concerned, this is actually an area that I personally find extremely satisfying, because I started working on generative AI at the end of 2018 when deepfakes came onto the scene. And I spent 2-3 years going around ministries, going around the commission, doing awareness raising and saying, look, there's something very, very big and substantial happening here. This is undermining, or this has the potential to undermine trust in the digital space. And we really need a fundamental standardization as well as policy response to it. And as I was gaining traction, all of a sudden ChatGPT burst onto the scene. And this is just such excellent support It's finally in the mainstream. The urgency is there. I was at the OECD ministerial meeting in December where I just had one session prepared that I was moderating on generative AI, and all of a sudden the whole ministerial meeting, all 3 days, was dominated by generative AI. So I see a real support now and possibility now to shape this area and to grasp just how big the disruption is, and that we have to manage both the immense innovative potential, but also the immense downsides. And looping back to standardization, we always have to ask ourselves, any piece of standardization as well as any piece of regulation, we can now hold against this additional type of AI. So rather than just looking at AI systems that are essentially algorithmic decision-making systems, we now also look at AI systems under the umbrella of generative AI, and we have to ask ourselves the question, do those draft standards and draft regulation also work for generative AI, or have we overlooked something fundamental? So that will certainly take up quite a bit of time and attention this year.
Konstantinos, or up to you?
Yeah, okay. I could start with, I will quote again Sebastian, but from his previous statement, not this one, where he expressed a kind of agony about the time that is running out. And I would say he's right. The conventional standardization life cycle and time does not work anymore in the landscape we are. So what should we do? And I think there are possibilities. We have to innovate the way we do standards ourselves. And this is what we try to do, by the way, with the two of you, with Julian and Sebastian. It is not a theory. But we have to realize that we respond to a need, which is really very fundamental and which is structural. And we need to adopt a modular and agile approach. Otherwise, knowledge engineering cannot keep pace with this rapid evolution. And there is a proliferation and advancements of the technology, the general, let's say AI, generative AI is an example of this. And will be always now driven by this dynamism. So we have, in my opinion, we start to create foundational horizontal standards that we can then fast and in an efficient way profile for various application contexts. And at IEEE, we try to do this. We created a series of specifications, and I mentioned them before. It is about transparency and accountability and so on. And we did not make them as formal standards to start with. But in reality, they're, let's say, sets of specifications, quite rich and quite consistent and coherent. And this is horizontal. It is transparency, for instance, for all systems, 150 criteria. But we can profile it and say, okay, what does it mean for autonomous driving? This is what we're doing right now, Julien, because I saw in your presentation, this is one of your focus. This is exactly what we're doing now. I don't know whether we're cooperating in this field or not. Yeah. And from the, let's say, around 1,000 criteria we have for all this cloud, perhaps only 250 apply for autonomous driving. And then we drive it down. And then for a specific use case, only 40. It is not, we don't need to take everything, but we have done the work for everything. And then in the profiling and the customization, which would take a few days to customize such as, let's say, to profile it for such a system, this can be done. And what we are doing now, I mean, it is almost funny, I must say. We reversed the time order. And I had really to overcome my own instincts to do this. When I was pressed by the Finnish public administrations to give them a system that they can use to assess the quality of their AI systems, which are very vast. I was resisting. I was saying, I don't have the standard for this. We must do the standard first and then build specification of the standards. And then we did exactly the opposite. We did first the specification, and now we take the specification and turning them into standards. And we want to work together with you, Sebastian. We're going to do it in parallel. We're going to take this specification and turn them to standards formally in our system, going through the whole process, opening them for every stakeholder to come and so on. And in parallel, we can introduce it into Senelec and to your GTC 21 to make it, let's say, to do the same as we did with the children-related standard. So, and this is how life drove us to this situation, which is really counterintuitive, but we did it, and I think it works. Just to give you an example about what it means for our standardization efforts in 23 and beyond, we have to be innovative and to be fast, collaborative, learn from each other, share with each other. Otherwise, we have no chance, really, to deliver what the political communities demand from us.
I have exactly the same point of view of Konstantinos. In fact, we need to go fast because the time is running, and so that's why we need to build up on existing approach and to share some knowledge and try to have something which is not identical but complementary. And I believe that the one of the main activities into standardization is really the question of the trustworthiness characteristic. And I fully agree with Angelius, with Konstantinos, we need to have something which is generic, modular, and you can, in fact, when you develop your application, you can pick up some specification or some criteria and adapt this criteria into your application. So you will not take everything, you will take, for example, some specific points, but not all. And just I give you one example. For example, if you have some critical application for aeronautics industry, for example, safety will be first. So you will take the criteria of safety first, robustness, etc. But maybe some other question about some other criteria will not be useful for this such application. So we need to build up something which is modular, generic, and that's one of my points. In fact, it's really a huge job in order to understand all the specification, all the criteria, and what will be the correspondence between this specification and the criteria you will adapt into some property for your AI-based system, in fact. And the correspondence between this specification and the property you want to demonstrate will be one of the issues we have to tackle also. And that's what we try to do into GTC 21. For example, we have actually some standardization in many standardization activities in many domains, such as nudging, for example. But we have also one on the trustworthiness characteristics. And I believe that this one is one of the key standards for promoting AI Act at the end. And it's really important to have more people involved, to have some cooperation, and to develop some strong cooperation between different points of view in order to build up something which is large enough.
Okay. Gentlemen, thanks so much. This is really a fantastic panel and really very eye-opening, especially on this side of the pond, to have a look at how this is being translated into action, how the standards, this whole movement is progressing in Europe. That's just about the time we have. I will check if there's any questions in the audience. A last opportunity. I saw there was one question around generative AI, which I think we touched on. If anyone has any, if the panelists, if you have any last comments for the group or any links you want to distribute, there's a window now.
There was a question at the beginning about material specifications and so on. When we are going to start standardizing the specifications that we have created, they will become public, because then everybody can participate and so on. And we have already now initiated a standardization project. It will be formalized very soon. And a lot of what we have been doing over the years and has been shared confidentially with our friends and partners here will become public knowledge. So it is just a matter of a few weeks. There is already a lot out there, but then the whole body of knowledge specifications will become public.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up then. So thanks to our panelists for your time, and to our members for joining. And we'll send out a follow-up email afterwards. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.